So a little bit about me. My name is Will Young. I'm director of Zappos Labs. We have a small little Zappos Labs team here in San Francisco. Mission in second. I'm also a general partner in the Vegas Tech Fund. Fun fact, one of the most prolific donut eaters at all of Zappos, 23 Krispy Kremes in 20 minutes. It's always the skinny Asian, right? So what is Zappos Labs? I'm not going to talk about it too much, but Zappos Labs, we're kind of like R&D for Zappos. I think conferences like this exist because retail is just changing so quickly. You know, I give the example of half of what I'm wearing I bought off Kickstarter, right? 1 year ago, no one thought that Kickstarter could be an e-commerce competitor to Amazon. Like, that's crazy. So it's changing so quickly. So what Zappos Labs is, we're a little team that we try a lot of different experiments. We built a Pinterest-based recommendation engine. What up, Pinterest? Tell us your Pinterest username, and we made Zappos-based recommendations. We've done curated shopping. Pretty much every buzzword in e-commerce, we've tried to do something in that. And I'll hit on one later on, too. I'm a partner in the Vegas Tech Fund. It's an angel seed investment fund out of Las Vegas. We've done a lot of e-commerce investments, not as much as 500, but a couple fun ones, including Spree Commerce that was mentioned by Andy from Bonobos, Combat Gent sweater, $45, cashmere blend. That's amazing, right? And going to vertical retail, this is a completely side note and just pitch for one of my investments, is when you go vertical, you can sell a $45 cashmere blend sweater. If you go to Zappos.com, the cheapest cashmere blend sweater you'll find is $100. Like, what is that? That is a striking thing that, if you don't remember anything else, buy a $45 sweater. So first, put your hand up if you had a friend who worked at a failed startup. Keep your hand up if they failed because they invested too much in customer service. If I was holding a microphone, I would just drop it and walk off stage right now. But and that would be all I need. No, but that's part of the talk. And you know, I think we're really well known for customer service. I won't go into all the things you probably know about. But you know, I think Tony's really created this ethos in the company that our entire company is all about customer service. And the things you've heard already, and for those who haven't read Delivering Happiness, I have a couple books up here. Feel free to grab it. If you grab it, you're going to be hissed and booed that you haven't read it already, though. But things you probably heard about is culture is number one priority. Actually, sometimes people forget, like, customer service is incredibly important, but culture is number one. You put your company culture first, all good things will happen. And I won't go into that too much. That's talked about a lot. We do have a core value of delivering wow through service. So it's not just about good customer service. You know, I think we're also famous for not having scripts. But we do have one goal that anytime someone calls us, we try and create a personal, emotional connection on the phone with them. Talk a little bit about that later. 4 weeks of call center training. So I work out of San Francisco. I'm director of labs, programming background. I've worked 4 weeks in our call center. My entire San Francisco team has. And kind of one crazy anecdote of that commitment to the investment is we hired a visual designer on my San Francisco team, Mike. Everyone knows that they need to go through this. Mike says, I'm looking forward to this training, but I'm about to have my third kid. I can't just leave my wife to go to Vegas for a month. We're like, no problem, let us know when you can. When his kid hit like 4 months old, we flew him, his wife, and 3 kids to live in Vegas for a month just so we could work call center training. And that's a commitment, like, in our DNA to service. And then kind of another fun thing is everyone's offered $4,000 to quit at the end of your call center training at Zappos. $4,000 is a lot of money to everyone, maybe not to some of the people in this room, but in general, it's a lot of money to anyone. You offer that to a call center rep who makes in the teens an hour. If they don't take that, you're pretty sure they're committed to being there for the right reasons. And legendary calls and stories. We share a lot of stories. You probably have friends that have shared some fun Zappos stories. I won't go into any of those. But so again, thinking about actionable things you guys as startups can do. So what can you do? I think obsess about listening to your customers. And this is kind of obvious advice, but I'll kind of relay why I call this talk Beyond Delivering Happiness is some lesser known early Zappos stories. And so who was a super early Twitter user who remembers what the Twitter track feature was? Really early Twitter feature. If you did track Zappos, every tweet that ever had Zappos in it would be texted to your phone. So Tony had on his phone as a super early Twitter user, track shoes. Every single tweet that ever had shoes in it was texted to his phone. That got crazy as Twitter obviously got a little bit bigger, but he was obsessed about any tweet that had Zappos, he'd look at it. And obviously things like Hootsuite and stuff exist today, but that was a big part of the DNA, listening to everything someone says. And not just making that a department, but him, the CEO. And I'll kind of guess Who's a founder of an e-com company or in the leadership of an e-com company here? Keep your hand up if you read every customer service email yesterday. So pretty good. Keep your hand up if you have over $1 million in sales. So how long did Tony read every single customer service email at Zappos? Until about 2007. We were almost $1 billion company that day, at that time. Like, that's crazy. Every single one. And I'll tell you one of his secrets of how he did it in the next slide. So I think, obviously, you have a customer service department, but as founders, never stop listening to your customers. And this is, a lot of people talk about this, like we've always been a very early adopter. Do not reply is one of the dumbest things you can do. You know, I think Pandora tells this great story about how even early on in Pandora's life, they used the founder's email address as the sending thing, and it was one of the best ways to listen about what people loved and didn't love about Pandora. Sorry, I'm totally off and looking at the wrong slide. I should look up there. So what was one of Tony's secrets? And Tony still uses this to this day. Who knows what that is? Wow, you guys are young. This is Pine. This is what Tony uses to read his email. If a lot of you might have used it in college, it's a really quick way to blast your email, but he really used it to read all the emails. And it's, again, that focus on listening to your customers. Kind of one other early Zappos stories is when you're small, I think it's super important that you listen and find out who your best customers are. And I think, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong slide again. Know how to identify your VIPs. There's a lot of people doing like influencer-based marketing right now, like things like fashion bloggers and clouds, and I think all of that's interesting, but you probably have in some of your early customers, some of your best VIPs right now. So I think about how you identify those customers, and I'll tell one story about what Tony did early. Learn to quickly identify them, and don't be afraid to personally reach out. So one story is early days of Zappos. Anytime that someone ordered over $300, Tony would get a text to his phone. Because, you know, 99, 2000, he was surprised that people would buy over $300 of shoes online. So he's like, I need to talk to these people if someone's crazy enough to do it. He'd get a text to his phone, and one of the people, who knows who that is? Philip Kaplan, Pud. So Tony sees Philip Kaplan in San Francisco. He calls him up. Is this Phil from Fuck Company? Which was what he was running at the time. And that's what Tony would do. He would just call up some of his people who are already passionate customers, call them up, just see how they're doing. And it's really to walk through what made you buy $300 of shoes online, and like taking some of that mentality and learning about your customers. There's one of our portfolio companies quarterly shared this really interesting story about how another thing, especially in the Silicon Valley world, just look through your customer list and you might have investors in it or influential people in it, and don't be afraid to just drop them an email. So quarterly, saw Naveen, one of the founders of Foursquare, was on it, and just drop some email. Hey, Naveen, what do you think of the service? And that is an actually amazing way to get a mentor. Like, they're already a customer. I think there's been great advice throughout the day. Find these mentors. So that's a great way. Look at your customer base and don't be afraid to reach out to them personally and give them a call. Never stop working the phones. So I asked a couple founders, again, put your hands up. Keep your hand up if you took a customer service call yesterday. And that's okay. I'm not trying to publicly shame you. I'm not at all trying to publicly shame. So don't feel bad. You got a lot to do. But I think the important part is never stop taking a call every now and then. So again, we're famous for the 4 weeks of call center training. This picture, which is, wow, a very big picture of me, is from December. And more interesting than my stupid face is right behind me is Fred Mosler, who was the first merchandiser we ever hired at Zappos. In a lot of ways, he's like Tony's go-to person, came from Nordstrom. He's still at Zappos, he's been there for probably 14, 15 years. What Fred and I are doing now is working the call center last December. Every holiday season, every single Zappos employee, all 1,500 of us, work 8 hours in the call center. Whether you're a developer, whether you're marketing, whether you're a lawyer, head of legal. If you called the Zappos call center in December, you could have talked to Tony. Tony works 8 hours again. And this is like, remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing. Remind yourself, and I think there's a couple things. As a labs team, what we really loved about that is we get inspiration from those calls. And I think it's a couple different things. One is, part of our call center training is when someone calls, make that personal emotional connection with them. One of the ways we actually do that is, it's kind of tricky, but I think it works really well. If you call from San Francisco, we try and route you to a San Francisco call rep. So you're like, hey, I'm from San Francisco, you're from San Francisco, what high school did you go to? But we always look for those moments to say, those are great hiking shoes, I love to hike, getting those opinions of the customers. So one of the things that inspires us as web and product people is we build this amazing, very easy to create personal emotional connection on the phone. How do we bring that to the web? And so that's some of our inspiration. And I'll say some of the best features built into our CRM, and I'll talk about it a little bit. Actually, why don't I just wait till the next slide? Great service is the entire experience. And I think Sean hit on it as well. Stuff like shipping, fulfillment, warehousing, all super hard things. You absolutely should get help on those things if you're a new e-com person. But just because you have maybe a head of fulfillment doesn't mean as a founder, you should absolutely understand every bit of it, because that is so important to your customer experience. Early days of Zappos, there probably were less. If you think about 99, 2000, there were fewer fulfillment consultants out there. So Tony went to Kentucky, helped build our warehouse from scratch. He managed the UPS relationship from scratch. He built a lot of our CRM. And on the right is, it looks like the GeoCities of CRMs. Amazingly, I took that screenshot last week. That is what our CRM looks like today. We still use some of the CRM that our CEO, Tony, wrote. How crazy is that? There's still some of his code written in Perl, and that's our CRM. And so here's the interesting thing. I talked about every year, never fail, everyone works 8 hours in the call center. Developers who work in the call center create some of the best CRM features when they're done their 8 hours on the phone. Because they walked out and they're like, that sucked. That was really hard to do in exchange for that customer. I need to code a better way. And so, you're going to be, as an early startup, be bombarded by all these tools, Hootsuite, CRM tools. I'm sure they're all fine, but as a founder, understand all of them. And I think, this next one I think is pretty specific to this audience. And I think sometimes a bit understated is great service is a way to stand out to investors. So like I said, I have the good fortune of being a partner in the Vegas Tech Fund, where I do specialize in a lot of our commerce investments. And probably for me, obviously with my Zappos background, service is super important. And I'll give one non-commerce example about, and I'm sure a lot of startups, especially SaaS startups, are doing this. And I think we've seen people not using do not reply emails. And so we use this service called I've Done This on my team. It's kind of like tracking software, project management software. 2 days after I signed up for the 30-day trial, I get this email from Walter. Hey there, how's it going? Let me know if there's anything I can help, founder, CEO. I knew this is an automated email, but I still appreciated that he put his info in there and asked how I can help. And actually one of the subtle things was the cadence of this email was perfect. 2 days after I signed up, I was literally thinking about how do I do this, and I'd done this. And that's super important when you're in that trial to pay period. So I actually emailed Walter back. He responds right away. We started a dialogue. I learned he actually worked across the street from me. So we're at Second and Mission. He worked at WeWork. We had coffee, and Walter and I stayed friends. We kept working on it. He got a lot of advice, product advice, blah, blah, blah. So this was 2012. And like a lot of startups, 2013 rolled around, and he's just like, my initial seed is done. I need to raise a bridge. He had like $10,000 in revenue. Not bad for a software company, but not enough to raise a Series A. And he went to all his early investors. He's like, help me with this bridge. And seed investors hate investing in bridges. And that's just a whole separate other thing. So even though he had $10,000 a month in traction, he could not invest. He could not get a follow-on investment. So what does he do? If you have a chance, Google this article. It's a guest post on Pando Daily. So Walter was really close to shutting down the company. Even though he had customers, he's like, I'm just going to look through my customer list and see who out of my customer list is an investor. Long story short, he reaches out to his customers and ends up raising $750,000 from his customers. And we were part of that. Vegas Tech Fund was part of that. And it was absolutely, and one thing Walter calls in his article is, sometimes investors, they make you do stupid things because we're stupid, but like one of the things that Walter talks about is the questions he got from his customers weren't about how big's your market, what's your plans for international expansion. It was all about what's the soul of your product and where are you taking it. And there was an amazing alignment there. And if he did not provide this one email, we probably wouldn't even have gone from free to paid, and we probably wouldn't have invested. And so that's an amazing thing. So I think never discount that personal reaching out, whether it's commerce or whatever. I'll give you one other example. And Sarah, if she's in the room, is totally going to laugh at this. These paper shoes, pretty cool, right? Yellow paper shoes. I want to be known as the yellow paper shoe guy. But they kickstarted it, and now we're in active conversations to potentially invest, and I'm sure I'm never supposed to say that. But one of the things that we did as kind of due diligence is looked at how they treated their customers on Kickstarter. And every single customer that took that leap of faith to say, you know what, you just have a demo video on your website, but I really like those shoes. I'm gonna trust you with $60 and hope you don't screw this up. Every single person that posted something, they responded to every single one. It's on the way. If they had an issue, they didn't say, sorry, it's too big, it's Kickstarter, we won't replace those. They took care of every single customer. And for us as an investor, we jump all over that. We think about, are those the type of people we want to work with? Absolutely. I'll give you one example, and I was really tempted to publicly shame this guy, but he came up to us for investment. We looked at his Kickstarter, and you can't see all the copy there, but he raised, if you do Kickstarter and you're not successful because you couldn't figure out the manufacturing or you couldn't build that app you promised, that happens, right? You had the best intentions. I'm sure this guy was not trying to scam anyone. It just didn't work out. But the fact he didn't even care to respond to people who are like, hey, give me a status update, I would never invest in this guy. And so I think, don't forget, in this day and age of Twitter, Facebook, all your customer service interactions are public, whether you like it or not. And I think we've had these fun moments at Zappos where some of our customer service emails to our customers, and luckily they were good emails, went viral. Like a guy would post it to the consumerist or whatever. It's like, oh my God, these guys brightened up my day. And now I'll kind of transition into the self-serving plug part of my talk. But this is also a tip for you guys is, in the day and age of Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook, there's so many things you can do, and I think Zappos was a really early leader in providing customer service over Twitter, and I think, I'm sure all of you are doing it. I'm sure if someone tweeted out, at store, you guys suck, you'd probably respond. I think that's a no-brainer, but I think social is providing this interesting mechanism to maybe go beyond just helping with problems. I'll kind of give one example. Just a pilot we're launched on Instagram as a way that you, even as a small company, can try this. Instagram user, who knows what OOTD is? Shout it out, what is it? Outfit of the day. That's a real thing, amazingly. So if you search that hashtag on Instagram, I took this screenshot maybe 4 weeks ago. If you search this hashtag now, I think there's 24 million pictures. As a retailer, that is 24 million people who took a picture of themselves and said, this is what I'm wearing today. Like, that blows my mind, right? And so as a retailer, we're thinking, how do we be a part of that? How do we not jump on that bandwagon? But clearly people are saying, this is my self-expression. This is what I can do. So we invented, like a lot of brands, our own hashtag that we thought we could own, and we called it NextOOTD. And so this is just a different way to provide service. So our pitch was, all you need to do is add the hashtag NextOOTD to your Instagram picture. And so this is Jenny, she adds it. You can see the second to last comment, hashtag NextOOTD. She doesn't even need to be a Zappos customer. That's a bat signal to Zappos to say, Zappos, create a personalized shopping experience based off my Instagram account. That's it, that's all she needs to do. And I love things like Stitch Fix. I think that's a big part of the future of shopping, but think about what you can learn from someone's Instagram profile. What their friends look like, what they look like, where they take pictures, what they do. So this is what Jenny's personalized recommendation. We write her a little personal message, completely manual. Write her a little personal message, think you'll like this. And again, this is a small pilot. We have no idea whether we could get this to work or not. So Jenny, her next picture on Instagram, she took a screenshot of our personalized recommendation and posted it on Instagram. It told us we're doing something right? Like we're always looking at how to acquire customers. Just go above and beyond on service, and that's marketing in itself. We've always looked at our call center as marketing, and I think you have an opportunity in social as a small startup to just try crazy things. And so I'm sure a lot of these things you guys are thinking about, if you're lean startup fans, you're thinking about what's the ROI of good service. And I'll kind of leave you with two kind of quotes from industry titans, Gary Vee and Tony. And probably a lot of you heard Gary's talk, but he was talking the values of social to a Fortune 50 CMO, and they're like, Gary, what's the ROI of social? What's the ROI of social? And in typical Gary fashion, he says, what's the ROI of your mother? You can't, in typical Tony fashion, his view is, what's the ROI of a hug? I would just say, don't even try and put an ROI on your customer service. If you're gonna do one thing that does not scale, treat your customers really well. And don't even worry about trying to get it to scale. Figure out scale later. Like, that is one thing you should not do in paid acquisition. Like, you should figure out how to scale that. But providing tremendous service to your customers, just do it and figure out scale later. And thanks for having me. My name's Will Young. If any of you run an e-commerce site and you want to exchange 20% friends and family coupons, I'm all for it. Hit me up. Well, thank you. Oh yeah, if there's one or two questions. So if anyone wants to grab a book, feel free, but you'll get hissed and booed. Read that yet? But anyway, well, thanks for having me if there's no questions.